In John chapter 5, verse 19, Jesus responds to the Jewish leaders saying, I assure you that the Son can't do anything by himself except what he sees the Father doing. Whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise. Now here, Jesus is talking about his relationship with God, right? And it seems like such an obvious thing, and yet sometimes we get so tripped up by this. We get so tripped up by this. And usually when I hear it is when we read from the Old Testament, particularly a part that just sounds, well, really violent. And here's usually how it goes. The God of the Old Testament is just so violent. What happened to the God of the New Testament? I want the God of the New Testament. They're the same God. They're the same God, and here's how I like to describe it. What we see in Jesus is the God of the Old and the New Testament. That's what John's giving us here. That's what Jesus is sharing with us, is that what we see in the Son is what we discover in the Father. So why is it that it seems as though God is so different in these two different testaments? Why is it that Jesus seems to be so loving and forgiving and peace-filled, while the God of the Old Testament, see my fingers doing the quotation marks, seems, well, not? I think of it this way. When you were in third grade, did you understand calculus? No, probably not. If you looked at the chalkboard in a calculus classroom, you probably would have recognized numbers. You probably would have recognized some, letters, and you might have even recognized some symbols, but you would not have known what they all mean. But that doesn't stop us from taking guesses, right? It doesn't stop us from trying to figure something out on that chalkboard. Are we going to be able to figure out the calculus on the calculus chalkboard in the calculus classroom when we're in third grade? Not if we're not a savant. So why do we do it? Because we want to know. And so I look at the Old Testament, and as I read the New Testament, I feel like I'm reading a bunch of third graders walking through the calculus classroom. They're trying to figure out something that is beyond their understanding. And so they're doing their level best. They're giving it the old college try. Jesus comes along, the Son of God comes along and shares with us his life, his ministry, his word, his gospel, his death and his resurrection. And in Jesus, we discover more of who God is. Here we are now as seniors in high school. We've learned, we've grown together, and we walk into the calculus classroom, and guess who's walked in the room? The calculus teacher. Jesus walks among us and now shares with us how to put all these letters and numbers together to make sense of it all. Jesus tells us who God really is. Up until then, we were doing our level best. And so who we discover in Jesus is the reality of God. God is love, God is peace, God is joy, God is hope. Now we get to do calculus. Amen.